Hello guys, welcome back. In this video tutorial, I want to discuss how to use Google Firestore database in your application. But before I start, I want to quickly introduce, if you haven't already worked on Google Firebase and Firestore database, Google's Cloud Firestore is still in beta release, as you can see, but it's supposed to be an enhanced version of original Google Firebase database. And there are a lot of new functionalities. So if you haven't already set up your project, or if you're working on a brand new project, I highly recommend you using this Cloud Firestore instead of Google Firebase database. One more thing I want to mention, what Google Cloud Firestore is providing is a true serverless architecture. That means, like back in old days, you always write your client application and you connect your client to a server, and then server does sometimes directly talk to the database. So what we mean by serverless architecture is, like, for some, so you take your client, write everything, all the logic on the client, and you can assume you can directly connect to your database, directly seek, run your queries against the database. There are other tools in the market like GraphQL. That's a very popular API architecture which can replace the REST API, but something I want to save that for a later discussion. Um, in this tutorial, I just want to focus on Google Cloud Firestore. So the reason I like Firestore is Firestore gives you complete control. Like, you don't need to worry about scaling up and down your database. You don't need to worry about like how to maintain users, how many users you got. Suppose your application just grows up and you end up supporting like millions of users. Definitely Cloud Firestore can happily support that. So, and it's very quick to start. So I'll highly recommend that, if you are working on an app and you just quickly want to productionize something, I highly recommend Cloud Firestore. Second thing, very often when you're working on an app, like, you put all your security rules and you want to, based on some security rules, you want to set up your validation on your client side. So for example, I'm working on a payroll app. So in the payroll app, I have set up the job code, salary code, and leave code. And, assume I don't want to, other employees to see other employees' salary. And for example, there is one admin or some salary administrator. He is only supposed to see the salary information and no one else is supposed to see that. So this kind of, like, if you're working on this kind of app, you have to write your server side validations. Because, if you just write your validation points at the client side, even if you're using any like Angular or React or any other framework, there's a huge chance that someone can, hack into your API and download all the data what they need. So, but, it doesn't replace that. I must say that you have to validate and secure your validation at the client. So for example, for a couple of the user, I don't want to give them edit access. I don't want to them to delete, or, I want to completely hide this menu from the some user depending on their jobs, roles, and responsibilities. Definitely, you should control that client at the client side. But it's very important that you take your server side very seriously. Never depend on your client side validation only. You have to apply the same set of rules and validation at server side. So without any further delay, let's get started. And again, I will be covering two different topics in this video tutorial. One is like how to use Angular and Angularfiie2 to query your database. Because you see, there are two different parts. So like, server, setting up your security and validation point at the server, and is equally important like how you use your Angularfiie2 to query the data. So there are two different things: Angularfiie2 and the Firebase Firestore rule setup. So let me show you something. So for example, you have a database, say Portal DB, and under Portal DB, and suppose you write allow read and write if true. So what this means is anybody can just quickly, who knows the URL, and even if they don't know the URL, they can go to the app, go to the application. It's very easy to go to the Chrome and go to the get your network credentials, and anybody can, go to your Google Firestore database and download the results. So never ever do that. Never ever do that unless you are testing your application. So next thing is you can do. I'll be covering all those things in detail, like, how to set up rules and everything. But before that, let's cover the client side first. And again, as usual, by end of this video tutorial, I'm going to include all of this code, or like write up, I have written the I mean like the link to this blog into the video description. So let's get started on the client side. So I have a client, as I was showing you, this client, this payroll app running on localhost 4200, and I have a client I already set up. So first thing you have to do, I'm going to get out, and the only thing, say you have to install, so assume you're using Angular 6, okay? So let me show you quickly. I'm using Angular 6.0.5. That is the very latest Angular release available as of today. So assume you have that. You have to do npm install Angular Fire2 at latest. You have to install Firebase at latest. These are the two things you will need, okay? And again, if you want to see the Google version of it, you can always hit to the GitHub repository, their GitHub repository, and I believe they have. So let's go to that Angularfiie2. So they look at this, github.com/angular/angularfiie2, and you can find all of these instructions over their website. Okay. I must say they are very good in documentation, so you can find all of these examples here. The only reason I'm doing tutorial here because I want to show you how to apply these techniques to a real data, to a real app. Okay, so once you install these things, I already have installed that, so I'm not going to do that anymore. Okay, let me get rid of this and let me serve this app here. Okay, once you have this your app up and running, you need to go to the app .module.ts, and then first thing you need to import the Angularfire module from Angularfire. You need Angular Firestore module. You need Fire storage. This is optional. If only if you are using the storage bucket, that means you want to upload or download couple of images or files from the from Fire database, then only you need to do that. You need another thing, Angular Fire Auth module, only if you are using Firebase authentication. And I highly recommend doing that. I have a separate tutorial. In that tutorial, I have shown you, I've discussed how to use Angular Firebase authentication in your app. So, and the next thing you need to import the Firebase. And last thing is like environment. So environment.ts file is where you keep all your Firebase credential. Again, I'm not going to show that because those are always should remain confidential to your particular app. Okay. Next thing is you need to import all of this thing. Very simple. Like import whatever you have imported. This one you need to include into that import statement. That's all you need to do actually. Okay. Now this is the only configuration things you need to do it in your app.module.ts. Now let's go to that backend service. So here actually the magic happens, and I'm not going to, sorry, I won't be able to do a live code demo here, but instead what I'm thinking, I should just cover the different functions or material, and then so that will be more beneficial for the people who are watching this tutorial. Okay, so let's get started. You need Angular Fire Auth if you're using authentication. Again, I highly recommend you do that. And then you need to import the Firestore document, Firestore, and Firestore collection here. Okay. Couple of RxJS operators, observable and behavior subjects. I'll tell you exactly why you need that. And I also need switch map and combine latest. Again, those are optional, but I highly recommend doing that because I will be doing those things. Okay. Next thing is you import your Firebase and environment configuration from your environment.ts file. Okay. Then obviously you have to include those things using dependency injection, just like you call those out in your constructor. Okay. Next thing is let's take a pause here. Let's take a moment here and try to see what do we do. So anytime you want to quickly read and write from your database, is always good to plan ahead. So my plan is, so the usual way you can write your data any way you like it. But what I prefer. So for example, let me show you. So for each and every document, okay, I always include couple of fields like who is the author, when it was created, when it was updated, what is the doc ID, and the delete flag. And I'll tell you what delete flag is. Okay, so usually, at any given point of time, it tells me who has actually, assume you have more than one users of your who are writing to your database. So author always tells you who actually wrote that document. Created date means like when was the original document was written, and updated means suppose somebody pulls an entry and update it. So you can always see, okay, when this was created and when this was updated. So suppose that if somebody created a document, it was never touched, obviously these two dates will be similar. But basically that's the reason I do it like this. Delete flag is, I'll discuss this in 1 minute, what delete flag is. So let's go to the code and I'll show you a couple of more helper functions. Okay. Other usual very good practices: never hard code your URLs into your function. So instead I created another URL function. I say get URLs, and simply I'm passing URL string, and then I return the URL strings which matches your Firebase database. So for example, let me go show you the Firebase database, and I'm going to discard that because I don't want to mess it up. So here you see all of these collections what you have written. These are your actual Firestore database database collections. So instead hard coded here, so that way if you later want to change it or you want to point your collections to some other collection, you can easily do that. So it's very easy to switch the values at one place. So this is why I always use this function. Other function I want to show you is get current date. Okay, and I'll tell you what that is. But just assume that there's a function called get current date, and it tells you it always return a new date. Now there are two different ways of returning the new date. Return new date, or you can return the Firebase Firestore server timestamp. So if I uncomment this and uncomment this server side, it will return. So the Firestore timestamp. So for example, I am hosting my Firestore at New Jersey, and I'm here in Los Angeles. It will show me the New Jersey time. But so assume like I want my client is in some third country, like they are in Mexico or some Canada guy is using it. How do I know when this document was created in the local time? So if that's a requirement, then you should return new date. Actually, it runs on the client's computer, and it gives you the browser date and time. Again, it may not be, so somebody is using a computer whose date time is not set up correctly, then it will be see garbage in garbage out. But this is a sacrifice you have to make. Like otherwise I don't want to write hefty code like, okay, just figure it out where the client is and exact what date time stamp is. That might be an overkill. But depending on your requirement, go ahead and implement that. So that's what get current does. Very simple. Now let's go what the get data means. So suppose from this URL, so for example from this ID, from this collection, and the doc ID, then quickly using this function you can retrieve your values. So how do you know that? So for example, whenever somebody user log in, so for example in my login I have implemented the social auth. Whenever somebody logs in, I always I have written a method which creates an entry to this collection. So in this entry, what I do, I actually capture their social display name, email, ID, and this thing. And when I create this, I always try to give their authentication UID as the same as the doc ID. So look at this, these two are similar. So that way I know what my doc ID is. So for example, if I want to see, so I know my auth ID of a user. So it's quickly, you just pass the auth ID here, URL here, and you can get the data. As simple as that. Again, this is a generic function, and whenever I need, so look at this, I want so this generic function can work with any of these things. So for example, I'm looking at the user auth collection and this document. All you need to do, get data and pass the doc ID and the user roles. That's simple, as simple as that. So you don't need to rewrite that function again. So these are helper function. Second helper function I want to see, set data. So what set data is? So look at this. I always, as I was saying, like, every record I always create a kind of, I append the sub record. So for example, ID, when it was updated, who was the author, and delete flag equals to no, is always no. So I'll tell you again, I'll come back to delete flag in a minute. So for example, and sometimes I do not create a create data or update data. I'm doing both of this thing in one function, set data. In that case, suppose a new user log in, I just need to pass the URL. URL is going to be my users, okay? And the doc ID is the authentication ID, and the data. So for example, I'm capturing their display name, or like in this case display name, email, or delete flag. I get it from there and I pass it that. And whenever it comes to the set data, I append this thing. I said, okay, doc ID is there or not. If doc ID is there, then don't do anything. That means like do not write your created date, because this is like, if doc ID is there, that means document already exists. So you just need to update the updated date time. That's how you differentiate when was the document created and when was the document actually updated. So if the doc ID is there, just don't do anything. But if doc ID is not there, that means a new document, and get a new date from the created date time, and it will tell you exactly when this document was created. And then you append all of those things to data, okay? And then delete flag equals to n. All you need to do, again, similar function, get URL. So pass that URL, whatever you have, suppose you want to write the users. So you just say users, pass the users here, pass the actual data, and pass your doc ID. And I'll show you in 1 minute, like, for example, let's look at this example. So look at this. I'm updating my user preferences. So my user data is what? Display name, email, photo URL, and portal and key. Suppose there is an optional field and those are blank. Look at this. So I'm just capturing all of those things from Google Auth or Facebook, or whatever that authentication method you are using. That becomes my data. Now when I call the set data method, look how cleverly I'm passing this is the actual data, which has the display name, email, photo URL, portal, key. And then when it goes to the server, but that's not exactly what I'm writing to server. I'm writing these fields plus these fields. So that's how you manipulate the user data. And then I want to pass it to this collection, user collection. So what it does, it says, okay, second argument is like, let's go ahead and URL is this one. But instead of passing the direct URL from here, I'm saying, okay, go to the get URL, get the actual URL string from this, and then instead of user, so here is, that's what I meant, you can easily manipulate that. So and then you write it over there. Okay, what was the third document? Okay, third document. So in this case, I know that because in user ID I know that, okay, this is the ID I want. So you can always pass the doc ID here. Okay, that's a very good idea too. So that's how I actually write it. So doing insert and update in one function, I love this idea, and I always implement it all across that. Okay. One more thing I want to mention: delete. Okay, so I have covered insert, creation, CRUD operation. So read, I create, update. These three I covered. Let's delete. In my app, I never delete anything. Never ever delete anything. So, but then you say like, how do you show like somebody delete anything? It should not, that row should not show up. So what I always do, actually I'm from the data warehousing background. So in data warehousing, what we do, this is the delete flag. So all I do, we do a soft delete. We say, okay, you know what, just mark the data flag equals to Y. So that means the data flag is deleted. And I always capture who deleted that data and when it was deleted. So you'll always have a copy of deleted data, but actually it's never deleted from the database. So that's the use of actually delete flag. So again, it depends on your requirement. I always prefer to do a soft delete because sometimes it happens like accident happens, and your client says, no, you know what, I want to see my recovered data, somebody accidentally deleted it. So you can always that's the reason I use this method, soft delete. Now if you really want to delete it, then it's very, very simple. Just like instead of this thing update, just say delete. As simple as that. Your document will be gone forever. So you can go ahead and say implement another method called hard delete data. So suppose, for example, there are a lot of junks in your database, and you don't care about that data ever. So you can just go ahead and implement hard delete data on that Angular method. Okay. Next thing I want to cover, the get docs, the reading method. So suppose, for example, in your database, you want to query your collection. So let me cover this. Okay, so it's very simple. You just identify what collection you are looking for, and then you can say my delete flag equals to n, because this will always be there, because you always want to see the only rows which are delete flag equals to n, that means which are not deleted. So the user only sees these things, okay? And then you can, depending on your requirement, you can have more criteria or add more criteria to these things. Okay. I have a similar method here. I'll come back to this in 1 minute. I'm just saving this, when it goes to the actual Firestore, that, then I will show you what it is. Okay, what is the next thing? Last thing I want to cover. So for example, you want to search, like, you want to search by employee ID, or some want to search by employee first name. So this is the reason I implemented this behavior subject here. Now what behavior subject is? Behavior subject is, again, I think of is a very good RxJS operator. It's kind of an observable. The only thing is, you can control that in your app. So how do you do that? So for example, just think of as an observable. I say, you know what? Okay, give me everything from this collection. Okay, but then you change your mind. You say, you know what? No, I want this collection. But what I want the collection where ID equals to some, say, 2 3 4 5, whatever that thing. That's how you implement search here. That's you want to. So suppose say 2 3 4 5, and you search it. It should show you the employee IDs, all the documents from your collection where employee ID is 2344. So how do you do that? So using getDocs, very simple. Like, so I have created two different methods here. Suppose this is the name filter and this is the number filter. You can create as many subjects you want. So, and then instead of calling getDocs, next time you call getDocs by name and you pass that string here. You say, okay, I want to search my employee collection where code equals to 2344. So all you need to do, basically what it does, it calls a next method on your observable. That means like your behavior subject. So what it is going to do, it's going to, run the same query. So it cancels out the FUBs. That's what behavior subject does. It cancels out the first observable, and then it goes, it says, okay, you know what, go ahead and run another query and give me the next observable which has the filtered value or whatever that is. Okay, so that's how that's why you call these two different methods. Okay, so that's the reason we have implemented getDocs. Okay, so there's only one thing. I think that's pretty much it. I have done, that's the way I do it. I'll do all the CRUD operations. So anywhere, like, in all my job code, salary code, all of the pages, what I do, I just use, like, I have written this helper function, and next time I just call them like this. I say, okay, you know what, I just pass them the data, okay, user data, and then, I pass them the collection, and if I know the document ID, then I just pass it, otherwise I don't. Very simple. Okay, so for example, say this one here, in this case, if I edit this, I know my ID here. So because I know this is the collection I'm looking for, so this is the ID I'm looking for here. So I know what this ID is. So here I pass this ID. Okay. So very simple. I use one function across. I try to use, like, minimize the number of functions. So that's why I have written the helper function. Okay. So that's pretty much it on this side. There's only one last thing remaining. Why I have written this get lookup docs. Okay. So let's switch to the server side. That's very, very interesting part. Now, for example, now I have compensation details included in every employee. So there are codes I have assigned to that each employee, and there's nothing wrong if someone else sees that, okay, you belong to this code, but what actually that code is. So for example, if I go to the salary code, and anybody can get in and say, okay, this is a salary code. So for example, let me write a new salary code here, and this is the salary of this employee. So somebody can go ahead and look into this one. Suppose I want to restrict that. So I can restrict it here on the client side, but it's not going to do any good. So for example, if a person using your client side, he knows your collection URL and he is authenticated, he can always hack into your database and get that value. So let's go ahead and secure these things here. Okay. So again, before I start the second part, Firestore, it's like you need to understand a little bit what Firestore is. Again, there's a documentation. I highly recommend going to the documentation. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, it's very simple. Go to their docs. Okay. So So again, whatever I'm going to discuss, you can find everything on their guides. So go to their guides, Firestore. Oops. Cloud Firestore. And again, kudos to their documentation. Is like, you can find everything out there. Okay, but basically, you can go ahead and read all that. This whole section, it will tell you how to secure a database. Okay, but before I do that, I just want to quickly, if somebody asks me how I am securing. Okay, it's very simple. Okay, so first thing I always think about, okay, what is my requirement? My requirement is I want to have, say in my company, I hire contractors who can only create the data, or an accountant who can read the data, or an editor, like, for example, an employee or supervisor who can do all the create, read, and update. And then, I have a manager who can also do the delete. So it can be an owner. And then I have an admin who can assign these roles to individual other users. I don't want, suppose you are just an editor and you go ahead and make yourself an admin. So that's the, whole exercise of securing your data is meaningless. So first of all, define your organization roles and requirements. Again, I will include the link of this blog to this video tutorial, but I just want to quickly discuss, like, how do I go about the implementing security. Second thing is, then you have to understand how the Google secures the data. Okay, so for example, um, there are two things you need to know: resource.data.variable and resource request.resource.data variable. And I'll show you in a minute what those things are. But you need to know what this resource.data is. Resource.data is what's coming from your client. So for example, I go ahead and say click on this. Say go to the employee. So here what I'm doing, I'm querying the employee collection. So when it goes here, it says, okay, read all the employee corrections, and what I'm sending, sending only my auth ID. Okay, so server knows only your auth ID. So what it does, it says, okay, if you are signed in, I'll tell you the data. Okay, so again, here what you can do, request.auth.uid. So what that means, like, if my request has my UID included, that means not equals to null, and or resource.data.visibility. Suppose I have a like, for example, about us page, and I don't care, like, anybody can go ahead and look at this about us page. Why should I secure it? Like, anybody is welcome to look at that. So I say, all I need to do, I go to the document, I create a field, I said visibility. Let me just show you. Add a field called visibility. I didn't spell it right. Make it a boolean and say true. That's it. So if my document has this visibility equals to true, that means anybody can read it, and that's the intention. So that if you are logged in, suppose I say, okay, you don't even need to log in, anybody can go ahead, like, about us page. I want people to know about my app. Okay, so either you are logged in or you are not even logged in, I don't care. This document is public and you can go ahead and I will allow you to read this document. That's what simply it means. So, but this is, basically pay attention to this request.auth.uid. Second thing is very, very important. So suppose request.resource.data.variable. Okay. So again, like, for example, what is request.resource.data? This is when you are doing your create or update. Okay, not the read. Read part, like, you are not sending read part, only you are sending your UID. But when you are doing your mutation, that means, like, you are updating the data. So for example, suppose your data has some fields which I don't want you to update. So I say, okay, you know what? I will let you update, allow update only if only content change. That means if suppose I create all your roles. Suppose you want to make yourself admin on the client side. So all you need to do, like here, and I say, you know what, data, and I say admin. Okay, equals to true, and I just run this function. There's nothing stops me. You cannot stop your client doing that. So if you do that, what client did, actually it made the client make himself admin. So in this case, actually it were roles. So so how to prevent that? So even I know that you won't let your users do it like this, but again, if somebody use the Chrome or some other like API to hack into your Firestore database, he can easily do that. So how to prevent that? You say, okay, simply, you know what, I will allow you to update only if the data.roles, only if your data doesn't contain this field which roles equals to true. So that's how you actually prevent the unauthorized or unwanted data access, and you prevent your data. Okay. Okay, two more things you need to know. Get method and exist method. Beautiful method. You will need these things. Okay. So let me discuss, like, there are two different approaches, how to secure your database. Okay. So first of all, so for example, you have too many types of users in your database. Okay. And one user, first approach is like, you say, we discuss the roles a user can have. Suppose you are a fee admin, or you are a payroll, or you are a HR employee, or you are just an employee. So how do Firestore knows that? So one approach is, there are users document, collections, and in your collection, I can go ahead and create a field, and I will say, okay, you know what, you are an employee equals to true, or you have an admin equals to false. Okay, that's how you can maintain this thing here, and then you control it like, okay, you know what, I won't let you do that because see, I was showing you that role which says, okay, the role equals to it should be blank. So that's how you can control that. Second approach is this one approach. Second approach is you create a totally different collection. So for example, there is a collection PPL, actually it's primary permission list. I just named it PPL. You can name it whatever you want. So in PPL, for each user ID, I create admin equals to false or read equals to true. You can have, like, suppose you have too many different number of roles. So what you can do, you can would rather create it here, and then you make sure that you do not give anyone access to this PPL. You have only one person who is admin who has access to this collection. So that's another method you can do that. And then how do you use this thing approach? So in your approach, sorry guys, like this is a long article, and I have to do a lot of back and forth. So look at this, allow read. So I'll allow you to read if ppls dot request dot auth dot uid dot eta dot admin equals to true. So that's, this is the second, using the second approach. If you are keeping all your roles and responsibilities in a separate schema or separate collections like primary permission list, that's how you can control it like this. Okay. So again, what method you choose is totally up to you. Basically, the way, if someone asks me that which approach should I use, that means, like, first approach is, should I keep all the roles and users roles and responsibility that user collection itself, or I should create a new collection? Someone asked me, answer is like, if you have too many roles and permissions, create a new separate collection. But if you have very fewer roles, like there's only one employee, there's only one fee admin, and there's one admin. Okay, you know what? Just go ahead and add 3 different fields to the user. It totally depends on your preferences. But this is the I have discussed these 2 approaches in this article here. Okay, what else? Okay, so that's what the get, and actually I was trying to tell you what the get and exist method does. That's how you check your incoming data, and if you want to go to some other collection within your Firebase and figure it out, like if the guy has access or not, you can use the get method. And the same thing with exist. Exist is like, suppose you want to quickly check, okay, if there is a such document exist or not. So for example, there's a portal, there's a secure key you keep somewhere, then you can use the exist method. Basically, both are very, very similar. Okay. Now, actually, that's pretty much it. That's all I have. What I have done, like, I have, yeah, one last thing. Sorry, one very. This is something I learned from my experience, so I wanted to share this with you. So suppose there is a method I created, like, there are different methods you can create, and I'm going to share all of those things, helper functions here. Okay. So what is the helper function? Again, so a couple of helper functions. If signed in, so suppose you want to see if the user is signed in or not. So, it's just like very simple. Check the auth ID. If it is not equals to null, signed in. If signed in are public, if the auth ID is not equals to null and data visibility equals to public. You can, if you are implementing roles, you can use this method here. Only content change. This is the method. One more method I love to use. Okay. is document owner. This is the method. Like, I had really trouble understanding this. So for example, you only want your user to update their own document. So I say is the doc owner. That means return if the request.auth.uid equals to resource.data.author. So remember, this is the reason both the things go hand in hand. So in Angularfiie2, I have created that method, created a field author where I'm capturing the UID. So if you are doing this, then you have to do this. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So this is based on the assumption that your data has a field called author, which has your UID. So that's how you can secure, you can let, so for example, you want only employees to update their own document, no one else should do that. So easily you can use this method is doc owner. So here, look at this. So for example, salary, and you say update or is document owner. It's as simple as that. So no one else should be able to read or write or create, these documents based on these rules. One last thing I want to discuss here. Remember, I was showing you this method get lookup docs. So this, if you just do it like this, it's not going to work. The reason it's not going to work because the query should match exactly this thing. So suppose you just say update if doc owner, read if doc owner. Suppose you execute this query, it will return nothing. And it took me a while to figure it out why it didn't return anything. So this is the reason, because in your query you have to also include in your where clause. So your where clause should match with this thing. Okay, otherwise it's not going to work. So this is why I created this separate function. So I hope, I think this is pretty much it. I know this is not the basics, and this is not advanced either. But using these functions, I am able to successfully create. I'm still working on this app, and I'll share this app in I'll upload it and I'll share all the code in near future. But even a complex app using just this simple configuration and simple rules, I was able to do a complete CRUD operation with security and with data validation using these tools. So I hope I helped out like in this tutorial. So if you have any question, just leave your comments. I'll be happy to answer those questions. Once again, please subscribe and just let me know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.